Prologue. It started with a single text message sent to the wrong person at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Luna Blackwood, exhausted from another 18-hour day authenticating ancient artifacts at Obsidian Industries, meant to text her best friend about the strange visions she'd been having. Instead, she sent it to her boss, the enigmatic, devastatingly handsome, and utterly terrifying CEO who'd built a mystical artifact empire from nothing. Damien Obsidian. A man who collected rare magical objects like other people collected stamps. A man who never smiled, never showed weakness, and definitely never gave junior appraisers like Luna a second glance. What she didn't know was that her accidental confession about seeing the true history of ancient objects would change everything. Because Damien Obsidian harbored secrets far darker than Luna could imagine, and her message had just revealed she possessed the one ability he'd been desperately searching for. Welcome to a story where one wrong text unleashes forces that have been sleeping for centuries, where an ordinary woman discovers she's anything but ordinary, and where the most dangerous predator in the supernatural world might just be her salvation. Chapter 1. The Mistake. The headache started the moment I touched the obsidian dagger. I was alone in the authentication lab, surrounded by artifacts that most people would kill to possess. Ancient grimoires, crystal orbs that hummed with residual energy, jewelry that had adorned long-dead royalty. This was my world. Obsidian Industries, the premier magical artifact auction house on the East Coast. My fingertips traced the dagger's surface, and suddenly I wasn't in the sterile white lab anymore. I was standing in a moonlit forest, watching a woman in medieval robes plunge this very blade into the heart of something that definitely wasn't human. The vision hit me like a freight train, as they always did. "Bloodthirsty little thing, aren't you?" I whispered to the dagger, quickly pulling my hands away. The vision faded, leaving me dizzy and nauseous. I glanced around the empty lab. It was past midnight, and I'd been here since dawn. Again. My supervisor, Margaret Chen, had been piling on the work lately, claiming I was too slow with my assessments. If only she knew that I didn't just authenticate artifacts, I saw their entire bloody histories. I pulled out my phone, desperate to text my best friend Riley about the latest vision. My fingers flew across the screen. "Riley, the visions are getting stronger. That dagger I'm working on? I saw it kill something supernatural in 1347. A demon, maybe?" The woman wielding it whispered an incantation in Latin before the strike. My head is pounding, and I swear I can still smell the sulfur. This ability is going to drive me insane. What if someone finds out? What if they think I'm making it up? God, I need wine and chocolate and maybe a lobotomy. I hit send without looking at the recipient name. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed with a response. My office. Now. My blood turned to ice. That wasn't Riley's number. I scrolled up to see who I'd actually texted, and my heart stopped. Damien Obsidian, CEO. The man who signed my paychecks and who I'd never spoken to directly in the 8 months I'd worked here. Oh shit. Oh shit. Oh shit. I stared at my phone like it had just sprouted fangs. I'm so fired. Chapter 2. The Summons. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending to my execution. Obsidian Industries occupied a sleek 40-story building in downtown Portland, and Damien's office was a penthouse that I'd only seen in company newsletters. My reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls looked exactly as terrified as I felt. Wild auburn hair escaping from its ponytail, dark circles under my green eyes, and my vintage band t-shirt that definitely wasn't appropriate for meeting the CEO. But it was 3 a.m., and I hadn't exactly planned on this impromptu career suicide. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area that screamed understated luxury. Midnight blue walls, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my yearly salary, and artwork that made my authenticator's heart race. Was that an original Van Gogh? "Miss Blackwood." The voice made me jump out of my skin. Damien Obsidian stood in the doorway of his office, and seeing him up close for the first time was like being struck by lightning. Tall, probably 6'3", with jet black hair and the kind of pale skin that suggested he didn't see much sunlight. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they were currently fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit despite the ungodly hour, and everything about him radiated power and danger. This was a man who didn't just collect magical artifacts. He looked like he could wield them. "Mr. Obsidian," I managed, my voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "I can explain." "Inside." He stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter his office. I walked past him, catching a hint of his cologne, something dark and expensive that made my head spin. His office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. But what caught my attention were the artifacts displayed throughout the room: ancient weapons, mystical books, objects that thrummed with barely contained power. "Sit," he commanded, moving to stand behind his desk. I perched on the edge of the leather chair across from him, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "Mr. Obsidian, I want to apologize for the inappropriate message. I was tired, and I meant to text someone else, and you see visions when you touch artifacts." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. I blinked. What?" "The dagger. You saw its history. A woman in medieval robes killing a demon in 1347. He leaned forward, his storm-gray eyes never leaving mine. "Tell me exactly what you saw." My mouth went dry. How could he possibly know that? "I don't understand." "The Latin incantation." "What were the words?" I swallowed hard. This felt like a trap, but something in his expression made me want to answer. "Demon revertere ad inferos, sanguis innocentium te vincit." "Return to hell, demon. The blood of innocence conquers you." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe even excitement. Remarkable. "I'm sorry, are you not firing me?" For the first time since I'd known of his existence, Damien Obsidian almost smiled. "Miss Blackwood, you've just demonstrated an ability that most people would kill for. Why would I fire you?" Chapter 3. The Revelation. "I don't understand," I said, still clutching my phone like it might save me from this surreal conversation. "You're not concerned that your employee might be having hallucinations?" Damien moved from behind his desk, walking to one of the display cases lining his office walls. Inside was a collection of rings that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "Tell me, Miss Blackwood, have your hallucinations ever been wrong?" He selected a silver ring adorned with a deep purple stone. "Have you ever seen a vision that didn't match the historical record?" I thought about it. In the 8 months I'd been working here, every vision I'd experienced had been verified by research. Sometimes I knew things about artifacts that weren't in any database, details that only turned up in obscure historical texts or archaeological reports. "No," I admitted quietly, "they've always been accurate. Because they're not hallucinations." He returned to his desk, setting the ring on the surface between us. "You're psychometric. It's an extremely rare gift, the ability to read the emotional and historical impressions left on objects." My heart started racing. That's not possible. Psychics aren't real." His laugh was low and rich, sending shivers down my spine. "Miss Blackwood, you work for a company that deals exclusively in magical artifacts. You've spent months authenticating items that defy natural law, and you're telling me psychics aren't real?" I stared at him, my worldview crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. "But I thought, the artifacts have power, but people don't actually—" "Some do." He gestured to the ring on his desk. "Touch it. Tell me what you see." "I don't think that's a good idea. The visions give me terrible headaches and—" "Touch it, Luna." The way he said my name made my breath catch. I'd never heard it spoken like that, like a caress, like a prayer. Against my better judgment, I reached for the ring. The moment my skin made contact with the metal, The world exploded into sensation. Chapter 4. The Vision. I was standing in a castle courtyard under a blood-red moon. The air reeked of sulfur and death, and screams echoed from the stone walls around me. In the center of the courtyard stood a man I recognized. Damien, but not as I knew him. This version of him wore medieval armor and moved with inhuman grace, cutting down attackers that weren't entirely human. His eyes glowed silver in the moonlight, and when he smiled, I caught the glint of fangs. Vampire, I breathed, and the vision Damien's head snapped toward me as if he'd heard. But that was impossible. I was just seeing a memory, not actually there. You can see me, he said, his voice filled with wonder and something darker. After all these centuries, someone can finally see me. I stumbled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The vision held me trapped as he approached, reaching out to touch my face. I yanked my hand away from the ring, gasping as I crashed back into the present. Damien was standing over me, his expression intense and unreadable. "What did you see?" he demanded. I stared up at him, my mind reeling. The man in the vision had looked exactly like him, moved like him, sounded like him. But that was impossible. That scene had taken place centuries ago. "You," I whispered. "I saw you. But it was medieval times, and you were fighting demons, and you had—" I touched my own neck, indicating where I'd seen the fangs. His jaw tightened. "Continue." "You looked at me. In the vision, you looked directly at me and spoke to me." My voice was shaking. "That's never happened before. I'm always just an observer, but you saw me." Damien was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes searching my face. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Luna, how old do you think I am?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. 35? 40? I was born in 1184. I built this company over 8 centuries of collecting artifacts and learning to navigate the human world." He sat on the edge of his desk, never breaking eye contact. "I'm a vampire, Luna, and you're the first psychometric I've ever met who could see me in their visions." The logical part of my brain wanted to laugh, to tell him this was all an elaborate joke. But looking into his eyes, seeing the weight of centuries in them, I knew he was telling the truth. "That's impossible," I said weakly. "Is it? You've just demonstrated impossible abilities yourself." He leaned closer. "The real question is, what are we going to do about it?" Chapter 5. The Proposal. I spent the next 3 days calling in sick to work while I processed the fact that vampires were real. Magic was real. And my boss was an 800-year-old predator who collected mystical artifacts like a hobby. Riley, my best friend and the only person I could talk to about any of this, was less than helpful. "So let me get this straight," she said, sprawled across my couch with a glass of wine. "Your devastatingly hot boss is a vampire. You have psychic powers, and instead of running for the hills, you're considering going back to work? I have to pay rent, Riley. And besides, he said he wants to help me understand my abilities." "Luna, honey, I love you, but you're being an idiot. This is how every supernatural romance novel starts, and it never ends well for the human." I threw a pillow at her. "This isn't a romance novel. This is my life, and it's complicated." "Complicated doesn't begin to cover it. The man drinks blood for a living. He said he doesn't hurt people, that he has arrangements." Riley sat up, fixing me with her most serious expression. "Listen to me very carefully. Vampire or not, powerful men are dangerous. And this one? He's been alive for 8 centuries. You think you can trust someone who's had that much time to perfect the art of manipulation?" Her words stuck with me as I returned to work the next morning. I'd spent hours researching everything I could find about psychometry and vampires, but most of it read like fiction. The only way to get real answers was to face Damien again. I was barely at my desk for 5 minutes when my phone buzzed with a text. "My office. We need to talk." This time, the elevator ride felt less like an execution and more like walking into a trap I was choosing to enter. Chapter 6. The Test. Damien's office looked different in daylight. The windows were tinted almost black, allowing only the faintest hint of sunlight to filter through. He stood with his back to me, looking out at the city below. "You've been researching," he said without turning around. "How did you—" "Never mind. Yes, I've been researching. Most of what I found sounds like fiction. Because most humans prefer to think of us as fiction, it makes their world feel safer." He turned to face me, and I was struck again by how otherworldly he looked, beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. "What do you want from me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to offer you a proposition." He moved to his desk, pulling out a leather portfolio. "A promotion, if you will. Instead of working in the authentication lab with Margaret, you'd work directly with me." I raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" "There are artifacts in this world that are more than just historical curiosities. Some are weapons, some are keys to power that could reshape reality itself." He opened the portfolio, revealing photographs of objects that made my skin crawl just looking at them. I need someone who can read their true histories, understand their purposes, before they fall into the wrong hands. One photograph in particular caught my attention. A black mirror that seemed to absorb light. Just looking at it made my head ache. "That mirror," I said, pointing to the photo. "There's something wrong with it." "Very good. That's the Mirror of Lameth. It's coming up for auction next week, and the seller claims it's merely decorative. But if it's the genuine article, what does it do? It shows the viewer their heart's deepest desire, but the price for that knowledge is their sanity." His eyes met mine. "I need to know if it's real before someone buys it and unleashes its power." I studied the photograph, feeling the pull of the artifact even through the image. "And you think I can tell you that by touching it?" "I think you're the only one who can." "But Luna—" His expression became serious. "This work would be dangerous. There are others who collect artifacts like these, people who wouldn't hesitate to kill for them. If you work with me, you'd be putting yourself at risk." "And if I don't?" "Then you go back to the authentication lab and I find another way to protect the world from objects that could destroy it." I looked at the photographs again, thinking about Riley's warnings, about the logical voice in my head telling me to run, but there was something else, something that had been growing since that first night in his office. "There's something you're not telling me," I said, "about why you need me specifically." For the first time since I'd known him, Damien looked uncertain. "You're right, there is something else." He moved to another display case, this one containing a single object, a crystal pendant that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. "This is the heart of Astria. It's been in my possession for 3 centuries, and it's the reason I've been able to build this company, to stay hidden from those who would see me destroyed." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But it's failing. The magic that protects me is weakening, and I have perhaps a year before it's gone entirely." "What does that have to do with me?" "The heart responds to psychometric touch. It feeds on the ability to read memories and emotions. If someone with your gift were to bond with it—" He looked at me with an expression that was part hope, part desperation. "It could be recharged, made strong enough to last another millennium." The pieces clicked into place. "You don't just want to help me understand my abilities, you need me to save your life." "Yes." At least he was honest about it. I stared at the crystal pendant, feeling the weight of the decision before me. Work with a vampire who'd been manipulating me from the beginning, or walk away and let him face whatever was hunting him. "What's the catch?" I asked. "Bonding with the heart would change you. You'd become something more than human, but less than what you are now. And you'd be tied to me, literally. My fate would become yours." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So I can choose between a normal life or magical slavery. Great options." Luna, I need time to think about this. How much time? I looked at him, this impossible man who'd turned my world upside down, and made a decision that would haunt me. Give me until the auction. 1 week. If I decide to help you, I'll be there. If not, I shrugged. Find someone else. Chapter 7. The Hunt. I should have known that working for a vampire would come with more dangers than just the ethical dilemma of magical bonding. I was leaving my apartment the next morning when I noticed the man following me. Tall, pale, with the kind of predatory grace I was starting to recognize in supernatural beings. He stayed exactly 50 feet behind me as I walked to the coffee shop, never getting closer, never falling farther back. By the time I reached my office, I'd counted 3 more. I tried to focus on work, but every time I looked out the lab windows, I saw them, watching, waiting. You look like you've seen a ghost, Margaret said, appearing at my workstation with her usual passive-aggressive smile. Everything all right? Fine, I lied, quickly closing the browser tab where I'd been researching vampire hunters. Just tired. Well, perhaps you should consider limiting your after-hours activities. I noticed you've been staying quite late recently. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were calculating. And Mr. Obsidian has been asking about your work specifically. That's unusual. A chill ran down my spine. What do you mean? Oh, nothing concrete. Just interesting that he's suddenly taken such a personal interest in our newest appraiser. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'd be careful, Luna. Men like Damien Obsidian don't pay attention to people like us without reason. As she walked away, I realized I might have more problems than just the stalkers outside. Chapter 8. The Attack. I stayed late that night, partly because I had work to finish, and partly because I was terrified to leave the building. The Watchers were still out there. I'd seen them from the window, but at least inside Obsidian Industries, I felt somewhat safe. I was wrong. The lights went out at exactly 11:47 p.m. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing the authentication lab in an eerie red glow. I grabbed my phone to call security, but there was no signal. That's when I heard the screaming. It was coming from the floor above me, short, sharp cries that cut off abruptly. Then nothing but silence. I crept to the lab door and peered out into the hallway. It was empty, but I could smell something wrong in the air, something that reminded me of the sulfur from my visions. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Top floor. Now. Come alone, or everyone dies. I stood there, heart pounding, weighing my options. I could try to escape, call the police, pretend this wasn't happening, or I could go upstairs and face whatever was hunting me. The decision was made for me when the elevator dinged and opened to reveal 2 figures dragged someone inside, a security guard who definitely wasn't moving. I took the stairs. The top floor was a war zone, scorch marks on the walls, furniture overturned, and the smell of sulfur so strong it made my eyes water. I could hear sounds of a fight coming from Damien's office, inhuman snarls, the crash of breaking glass, the distinctive sound of claws on stone. I pushed open the office doors and stepped into chaos. Damien was fighting 3 creatures that looked like they'd crawled out of a nightmare. They had human-like forms but with gray skin, elongated limbs, and faces full of too many teeth. Demons, I realized, just like the one from my vision of the dagger. One of them noticed me and smiled with a mouthful of razors. The psychometric, it hissed. Perfect timing. It lunged toward me, but Damien moved faster than humanly possible, intercepting it midair. His eyes were glowing silver, and when he smiled, his fangs were fully extended. Touch the heart, he called to me without taking his eyes off his opponents. On my desk. Touch it now. The crystal pendant was sitting in the center of his desk, pulsing with inner light. I reached for it just as one of the demons broke free from the fight and dove toward me. The moment my fingers made contact with the crystal, the world exploded into power. Chapter 9. The Bonding. The heart of Astria didn't just show me visions, it pulled me into them, made me part of them. I was Damien in 1184, a young knight dying on a battlefield, making a desperate bargain with a creature of shadows to save his village from a demon invasion. I was him in 1456, learning to control his new nature, discovering his gift for finding and binding magical objects. I was him in 1823, building his first company, using his supernatural abilities to acquire artifacts that others couldn't touch. And I was him now, fighting creatures that had been hunting him for centuries, finally cornered after all these years of hiding. But I wasn't just seeing his memories. I was feeling them. His loneliness, the weight of centuries spent alone, the careful balance he maintained between his vampiric nature and his desire to protect humanity from the darker things in the world. And underneath it all, I felt something else, a warmth that had nothing to do with the magic of the heart. He loved me. Not the idea of me, not what I could do for him, but me. Luna Blackwood, with my messy hair and vintage t-shirts and tendency to talk too much when I was nervous. He'd been falling for me since that first accidental text, and he'd been fighting it because he knew what it would mean. The crystal pulsed in my hand, and I felt its power flowing through me, changing me. My psychometric abilities exploded outward, touching every artifact in the building. I could see their histories, their purposes, their potential for good or evil. And I could see the demons' true forms, not just mindless monsters, but soldiers in an ancient war between light and darkness. Chapter 10. The Choice. When I opened my eyes, the fight was over. The demons lay motionless on the floor, their bodies already beginning to dissolve into shadow. Damien knelt beside me, his face human again, but his eyes filled with concern. "Luna, can you hear me?" I sat up slowly, still clutching the heart. It felt warm in my hand, no longer the cold crystal it had been before. "I'm okay, I think." "The bonding. How do you feel?" I took inventory of my body. I felt different, stronger, more aware. I could sense the life force of everything around me. Damien's cool vampiric energy, the lingering essence of the demons, even the plants in the office below us. "Changed," I said honestly, "but not broken." He helped me to my feet, his touch sending sparks through my skin. Now that I'd felt his memories, his emotions, I couldn't pretend I didn't understand what was between us. "The demons," I said, trying to focus on practical matters. "They were looking for me specifically." "Yes. There are others who know about your abilities now. The attack tonight was just the beginning." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, Luna. I never wanted you to be in danger because of me. But I am, and bonding with the heart means I always will be." "Yes." I looked at the crystal in my hand, feeling its power humming through my veins. I thought about my conversation with Riley, about the normal life I'd been living just a week ago. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. "What happens next?" I asked. "That depends on you. The bond can be broken, but it would take time and considerable risk." Or, he paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. "You could stay. Help me protect the artifacts that need protecting. Build something together." "As what? Your employee? Your magical battery?" "As my partner, in every sense of the word." The weight of the decision settled on my shoulders. I could try to go back to my old life, knowing that demons and worse things would always be hunting me. Or I could step fully into this new world with all its dangers and possibilities. I thought about the visions I'd shared with him, the centuries of loneliness he'd endured, the careful balance he maintained between monster and protector. "I have conditions," I said. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Name them." "No more lies, no more manipulation. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals." "Agreed." "And I want to learn everything. Not just about my abilities, but about this world you've been hiding. The real supernatural community." "Done." And I took a breath, feeling suddenly shy. If we're going to be partners in every sense, I want to take it slow. I may have felt your memories, but I still barely know you as yourself." This time, his smile was full and genuine. "Luna Blackwood, I've waited 8 centuries for someone like you. I think I can manage a little patience." I held out the heart of Astria, its faceted surface now glowing with my own energy mixed with his. "Then let's see what we can build together." Chapter 11: The New Partnership. 3 months later, I was standing in the penthouse office that was now officially mine as well as Damien's, watching him negotiate with a seller who definitely wasn't human. The creature looked like a businessman on the surface, but my enhanced abilities let me see through the glamour to the scaled skin and vertical pupils underneath. "The Grimoire of Shadows is not for sale to just anyone," the seller was saying in a voice like rustling leaves. "It requires a handler who understands its appetite." "I assure you, we have extensive experience with sentient texts," Damien replied smoothly. "Miss Blackwood here is our specialist in dangerous artifacts." The creature's attention shifted to me, and I felt the weight of its ancient gaze. "The psychometric. Yes, I can sense the power in you. Much stronger than it was." It smiled, revealing teeth like broken glass. "The bonding changed you, didn't it?" "It enhanced what was already there," I said carefully. We'd learned that some supernatural beings saw the heart's influence as a weakness to exploit. Indeed. The creature pulled out a leather-bound book that seemed to absorb light. Just looking at it made my skin crawl. "Touch it. Tell me what you see." I glanced at Damien, who nodded almost imperceptibly. We'd developed our own system of communication over the past months, a mixture of subtle gestures and the psychic connection the heart had created between us. I reached for the grimoire and immediately wished I hadn't. The book was hungry. Not metaphorically, literally hungry for human fear, pain, and eventually life itself. It had been created by a sorcerer who'd bound demons into its pages, and it had been feeding on its readers for over 1,000 years. But underneath that horrible purpose, I sensed something else. A loophole. A way to contain its power without destroying it. "It's genuine," I said, pulling my hand back. 13th century, created by Marith the Damned. But there's a binding spell woven into the cover. If the right words are spoken, it can be neutralized." The creature's eyes widened. "Impossible. No psychometric has ever detected the binding." "I'm not just any psychometric," I replied, feeling Damien's pride through our connection. We bought the grimoire for a fraction of its usual price, and I spent the afternoon researching the binding spell while Damien handled the more mundane aspects of running a supernatural auction house. Chapter 12: The Revelation. "You're getting stronger," Damien said that evening as we walked through the city. It had become our routine, evening walks where we could talk freely without worrying about who might be listening. "The heart's influence?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Partly, but also practice. You've touched more powerful artifacts in the past 3 months than most psychometrics encounter in a lifetime." He paused beside a fountain, the water catching the streetlights. "There's something else, though. Something I need to tell you." I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. "What?" "The demons that attacked us, they weren't random. They were sent by someone specific." His jaw tightened. "Someone I know." "Who?" "Isa, my former associate. She's been hunting artifacts for her own collection, and she's not particular about who gets hurt in the process." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "She knows about you now, Luna, about what you can do, and she'll want you for herself." The name was familiar from the visions I'd shared with him. Isa, beautiful, powerful, and utterly ruthless. They'd been partners once, in business and more, until he'd discovered her true nature. "What does she want with me?" "The same thing she's always wanted. Power. With a psychometric of your abilities, she could acquire any artifact she desired. And unlike me..." He reached up to touch my face gently. She wouldn't care about your well-being. I leaned into his touch, feeling the cool strength of his skin against mine. Over the months, we'd been building something real between us, not just the magical bond, but genuine affection and trust. So, what do? We prepare, and we hope that what we've built together is strong enough to stand against what's coming. As we walked home together, I felt the weight of the future settling around us. But for the first time since this all began, I wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The heart of Astria pulsed gently against my chest, where I now wore it as a pendant, and through its power, I felt Damien's resolve matching my own. We'd both found something worth fighting for. Epilogue. 6 months after that first accidental text message, I stood in the authentication lab where it all began, training our newest employee, a young man with the rare ability to see through supernatural disguises. The key, I was explaining, is not to fight the visions. Let them wash over you, and focus on the details that matter for authentication. Through the lab's glass walls, I could see Damien in his office, handling a video call with collectors from 3 different continents. The sight made me smile. We'd found our rhythm, our balance between the supernatural and the mundane, between the dangerous work we did and the life we were building together. My phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Dinner tonight? I want to hear about your latest death-defying adventure." I laughed, typing back, "Can't tonight. Date with a vampire. Rain check? You're living in a supernatural romance novel, and I'm living vicariously through you. Fine, but I want details later." As I put my phone away, I caught sight of my reflection in the lab's security mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the exhausted, uncertain person who'd made that first mistake 6 months ago. This woman's eyes held power and confidence. This woman knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. The heart of Astria caught the light, reminding me of everything that had changed, everything I'd gained and lost and chosen. Sometimes the best mistakes are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. My phone buzzed with one more text, this one from Damien. "Dinner tonight. I have something important to ask you." I looked up to find him watching me through his office window, and even from this distance, I could see the nervousness in his expression. After 8 centuries of existence, Damien Obsidian was nervous about something. I texted back, "My place or yours?" "Yours. And Luna? We're something special." As I headed home to get ready for whatever surprise he had planned, I thought about how a single wrong text message had changed everything. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor, but sometimes, just sometimes, it knows exactly what it's doing. The end. Thank you for listening till the end. If you enjoy the story, please hit the like button and we will appreciate your comments. Kindly subscribe, this means a lot to us.